People often ask what prenatal or 先天 in Chinese really means in Taoism. And honestly, it's much simpler than most people think. Prenatal isn't something mystical. It isn't something you visualize or try to generate. It's simply the state before the mind starts dividing reality. It is before yin and yang split, before there is this versus that, and before any preferences, resistance, or judgment shows up. When the mind hasn't started commenting on anything yet, and when there's no inner movement trying to label or control, that state is prenatal. The moment a thought appears and say, I like this or I don't like that, something has already shifted. Nothing is wrong with that. It's just no longer the original state. And when the mind rests there, before it fragments itself, you naturally enter what Taoism calls 妙境. It is the subtle state or wondrous state. In Buddhism, the same state is called nirvana. Different language, same reality. And this is important. This state is not dramatic. There are no visions. It's nothing intense. There's no special effects. And what is noticeable is actually how quiet it is. The noise will settle. The constant inner friction fades. The mind stops arguing with itself. And this is why it's described as 清净, meaning clear and still. It's not because something new appears, but because nothing false is being added. Things don't feel imaginary or spaced out. They feel more real, not less. There's a stability to it. It doesn't depend on your mood. It doesn't collapse when circumstances change, because it isn't created by thinking. And when the mind is no longer divided like this, action changes naturally. There is no impulse to react, no need to prove anything, and no compulsion to chase or resist life. That's why the classical texts say the state is separate from confusion and wrongdoing. Not because someone becomes morally perfect, but because the disturbance no longer the place action comes from. This is why we cultivate, not to escape the world, not to gain power, not to collect spiritual experiences. We cultivate to return to our original nature, to the state that existed before the mind learned to fragment itself. At its core, cultivation is simply cultivating the heart, because when the heart settles, everything else falls into place on its own. We don't practice to become something new. We practice to stop losing ourselves, to stop living from confusion, to stop mistaking noise for life. And that's why we cultivate, to return to what was already whole before we learned how to divide.